Namaste and welcome to this exciting episode of Sattology, Debunking Mythology. Sattology means science of truth or study of truth. Opposite of that is mythology, which means science or study of fake lie or imagination. आप सबका इस सत्तोलॉजी के नए एपिसोड में बहुत बहुत स्वागत है. Do not forget that all our courses, 4 courses, are relaunching again for 2024. We finished our last year. Officially, our last year finished at March 31st, but we're going to launch the new year 2024 with a bang very shortly. आज हमारे साथ बड़े स्पेशल गेस्ट हैं. आप उनको बहुत बार सुन चुके हैं हमारे चैनल पे, और मेजर जनरल शशि अस्थाना जी. एंड वी विल डिस्कस कि वर्ल्ड वॉर 3 का जो इतना बात लोग करते हैं, इज इट रियली गोइंग टू हैपन? एंड ही इज द बेस्ट पर्सन टू आंसर दैट. He consults at various international forums, very well known abroad. So without delay, let us welcome Major General Shashi Asthana.
Thank you. Pleasure speaking to you and your viewers.
So number one thing, first of all, I always, studying economics and various experts, Ankit Shahji and other people who come on our channel, and they all say today's economics don't tell anything about World War. Prime Minister Modi has said very clearly, openly, this is not an era of war. World War One, World War Two, without Indian troops, there was no British victory. Possible, it was not possible. And the way Indian Navy has shown its skills and capabilities at the sea, clearly Indian coastline is pretty secure in many ways as possible. And this is just the outskirts, 2,000 miles away from Indian coast. So how do you see this entire YouTube shows and other people talking about World War III, and especially Americans talking a lot about World War III? What do you see, sir?
See, today, as was mentioned, that this is not an era of war, but the fact is that the dimensions as well as the instruments of warfare have changed. Earlier, militaries used to fight. Today, it is the comprehensive national power of one side fighting the opponent. And therefore, the trend which we thought we had left long back, that after Second World War, the world went into Cold War 1.0, wherein the Western powers under the leadership of USA were trying to somehow have an edge over USSR and to see the ultimate demise of USSR broken into pieces, which happened. So when USSR broke, everybody thought that Cold War 1.0 is over. But then it didn't happen that way, because still people felt that Russia is strong. And thereafter, we had NATO inching eastwards, despite Baker's promise that not an inch eastward and things like that. But notwithstanding that, while we were, and the Russia-Ukraine war again indicates that Cold War 1.0 is not over. Thereafter, while this was on, we found that there is a very intense competition between China, which was propped up to counterweight USSR, and that was propped up again by the Westerns. So when it was done, and when China became strong, China also followed a strategy, winning without fighting, and buy your time and build your strength. So for about 20, 30, 2-3 decades, they built their economy, they built their strength, and now they have become a reasonable power to challenge USA in a number of, shall I say, domains. So therefore, this is what is Cold War 2.0. But what everybody professes, especially if you see the Chinese methodology, they follow Sun Tzu, which says that you should win without fighting. You should be able to perhaps let the opponent do what you want to do without fighting. So China is going ahead with that. At the same time, let's see, as far as United States is concerned, it did get involved into contact warfare in a number of places, whether it was Afghanistan or it was Vietnam or it was Iraq or things like that. And everywhere, especially Afghanistan and Vietnam, uh, the results were not what they thought. And that too, when it was an asymmetric war in a manner that you had all kinds of technology, military hardware, asymmetry of everything in favor of the Western countries, but still somebody else prevailed. So that means there is something wrong with the strategy, and that is what Sean McFate says in his book as to why West is losing all wars. So this is exactly what happened. Now the whole world is looking at somehow defeating the other guy without having got involved in a contact warfare. And this actually sublimed and give Cold War 1.0 and a mixture of Cold War 2.0. So as I say that some of the Western countries have mixed up Cold War 1.0 and Cold War 2.0. And this mixture and this cocktail has given rise to a very different scenario. With the result, what happened was that while the USA-led NATO is fighting Russia in an undeclared, non-kinetic, non-contact warfare, which includes economic war, political war, diplomatic war, info war, and so on and so forth. The contact war is limited to Russia and Ukraine to start with. So therefore, it's a bigger game, which is a big power contestation, and Russia happens to be the battleground of that. Similarly, when you look towards China, the Cold War is happening wherein perhaps Taiwan and South China Sea is the battleground. There are the bases are being made in Philippines. Taiwan is being supported. At the same time, Chinese are showing their aggression, but Chinese, the way they are going about it is that they are looking at active defense strategy, and the implementation is in terms of incremental encroachment strategy. So what they do is that they don't want to fight, and incremental strategy, encroachment strategy dictates that you continue your aggression, you do your far power demonstration, and stop just short of war. Keep threatening the other guy. So this is exactly what they are doing to Taiwan. That they kept threatening from 2013. Xi Jinping announced that I will do reunification. This is 2024. And till now, I don't think a single soldier has landed up in any of the islands of Taiwan. But the fact is that he has done all kinds of firepower demonstration on every single excuse. Whether it is Nancy Pelosi landing up in Taiwan or whatever else is happening, or any new arsenal is given there, or something else, some exercise happening somewhere in South Korea or something like that. So this is what has happened. But now the Cold War is taking a slightly different dimension. Now in this dimension, what has happened is there are two groups emerging. One is the Western group led by USA, and the other one is China, Russia combined, along with North Korea, Iran, and maybe Syria and things like that. Now, both of them are trying to win over without fighting and increase their influence without fighting. So, it is a game where a big power contestation is going on all over the world without fighting. Similarly, after Second World War, there have been almost about 250 minor and major wars, as they call it. And interestingly, 201, there was some P5 member or involved or the other, or it was initiated by some P5 member or the other. Similarly, the trend of warfare has changed, that instead of interstate warfare, Russia-Ukraine is an exception, most of the wars are intrastate warfare. And in this intrastate warfare, there are proxies. So there is hybrid war, there is gray zone warfare, there are proxies. There are subtle difference which I can explain a little later. But then the trend is this, that Don't fight, don't escalate to a point that you will reach a world war or world war status. And apparently, the amount of destructive power which the opposing sides have, it just doesn't make any sense for anybody to fight a world war. But then the fact is that short of fighting a world war, a cold war is an option which everybody is trying to adopt, and a mix of contact war and perhaps non-kinetic warfare. Bulk is non-kinetic warfare. These are the instruments which are being used to a great extent in pursuing shall I say, imposing their will on the opposing opponent. So this is how I see that this is the kind of big power contestation which is going on.
See, a lot of political developments are there. Like, for example, uh, Macron saying he's going to send troops to Ukraine, and US and UK opposing it. Poland wanted to do something, US and UK are opposing it. And Germany doesn't want to send anything because Germany remembers what's going to happen, because Russian forces and Russian military production is all-time high now, all-time high since World War II. So the so do you think that the US really wants to go for a war now, because the economy and everything is different right now within USA, and USA is suffering from a bigger immigration problem also?
Yeah, as I said, I will quote again a US author itself, Sean McFed. He says shadow wars are coming, and therefore, if USA has its say, it would like to defeat all its enemies by shadow war. Now, by shadow war, what it means? You found Ukraine, you found willing Zelensky, one provoked, you established things like Azov group battalions, etc., etc. You carried out an exercise. Zelensky signed a decree. Zelensky was, of course, a puppet of the West. He signed a decree to say that I will take back Crimea. There was an exercise held in NATO, and at the end of the day, Putin got provoked, and apparently Putin also launched an operation without thinking as to what is going to be the end state, and with a lot of miscalculations, for which he has suffered in terms of casualties, in terms of casualties of men as well as material. So, notwithstanding that, the issue was that this was a shadow war, and it continues to be so. Because if USA can weaken the opponent, in this particular case, Russia, without carrying the burden of the body bags, and if Ukraine, if Ukrainians die, so be it. So long the weapons are selling, so long the arms industry is doing well, so long as the jobs are improving, job prospects are improving, so long the bulk of the aid, the optics of the aid is that, okay, so much of aid is going, but then the fact is that there are certain loans as well. And then there is subsequently in the post-war construction and in repayment of loan, there are likely to be gains as well. The fact that most of the arm industry, their shares are high, and so is the case with the oil companies of the West as well as the rest of the world. The shares are high, but then there were miscalculations there. People thought that perhaps wars can be won by sanctions or by economic war and by information war. That didn't happen. Despite all the information war and villainizing Putin, apparently what has happened is Putin has come out, seems to have come out very strong and in a manner that as the entire world kept upping the ante by saying the rhetoric that Putin must lose, and the Russian public saw it as the entire West ganging up against them, and therefore the approval ratings of Putin, what they were during the at the beginning of the war, they have improved much more as of today. So this is the situation which happened. So apparently, if somebody was to fight a world war, the approach would have been different. But the fact is that the US-led West wants to fight a proxy war and not a world war. Similarly, the cost it is prohibitive. The amount of arsenal which Russia has got, there is no doubt that that arsenal will remain unused if survival of Russia is threatened. And they have certain strategies, like one of them which is talked of is escalate to de-escalate. That if they feel that their survival is threatened, they will not hesitate using a nuclear arsenal in some manner or the other. Maybe a tactical weapon, tactical nuke to perhaps give some kind of message. But then the fact is that till now, the nuclear deterrence has worked, and I have no reason to believe that the nuclear deterrence will not work in future. As far as French president's statement is concerned, I think it was an isolated statement. I don't think it's a well thought out plan by NATO, because neither America nor any other countries are ready to do it. Similarly, Poland is actually nervous. So any action which they do, they are basically trying, they think that if you see the geography, there is something called as Kaliningrad. Now, Kaliningrad, by virtue of expansion of NATO, has got separated from Russia. And they all fear that if Putin is thinking of taking Donbass in Ukraine and then making a southern corridor, which he has done, and if he extends this corridor, then maybe that he will landlock Ukraine and join up with Transnistria. That is what perhaps appears to be the Russian plan. And maybe NATO is fearing that maybe that after that, if he wants to join Kaliningrad with the main Russia, then some of these eastern countries where perhaps Poland, Latvia, and all these smaller countries get involved. Now, this is the fear which is actually prompting many strategists to say that maybe that there be a third world war. Now, as far as Putin is concerned, he has to use his deterrence. And the deterrence is that NATO must not enter the war. And although everybody knows, Putin also knows, and I think it's hardly hidden that there are some soldiers of NATO and some specialists of NATO, if not soldiers, in the garb of contractors, in the garb of, shall I say, whether mercenaries or some other or volunteers are there. And some of the damages which has happened in Black Sea Fleet can be attributed to very precision shooting, which I don't think Ukraine was prepared for. So apparently it has been done by somebody else. And then there are a lot of conspiracy theories which are uncovered as to who blew Nord Stream 2, who attacked the Kerch Bridge. All these are stories for which there is no clear answer, because everybody is trying to go behind so-called shadow war or so-called anonymity. But the fact is that everybody is trying that if without NATO getting involved directly, if we can weaken Russia, we should do that. And they are also thinking that they also thought so, that if by isolating Russia, by sanctions, if Russia becomes weak, maybe a message will also go to China that do not try anything in South China Sea or in Taiwan or in Indo-Pacific region to contest the Western powers. But then neither the isolation has worked nor the sanctions have worked. Russians, whatever they have lost because of their miscalculations too. They have made many miscalculations, and so has the West made many miscalculations. And the most unfortunate part is that the battleground, which happens to be Ukraine, they are the ones who are suffering maximum, and they are destroyed. And I don't think, irrespective of what promises anybody can make, people can give weapons, people can give ammunition, but then nobody can give soldiers to Ukraine. And if the asymmetry in soldiers, trained soldiers, remains what it is, then there is no way that Ukraine can win back its territory. So geography of Ukraine perhaps remains changed forever, perhaps. So this is the way it is appearing. Now what has happened is this war is prolonging for two reasons. Firstly, the exit strategy and conflict termination objectives were not thought of by the West. So now they don't know how to terminate this conflict. Secondly, terminating at this stage when more than 20% of the territory has been captured by Russia is a bigger embarrassment than the embarrassment of continuing this war even without winning it. So apparently, they find that that is a better option or a lesser embarrassment. So we might as well continue. In any case, your soldiers are not dying, and there is a willing Zelensky who also thinks that continuation of war is only the ticket to his survival, political survival. Otherwise, he has no chance. It is something like even in Israel-Hamas war, the fact is everybody knows that the Hamas cannot be destroyed. If America could not destroy Taliban in 20 years, there is no way that Netanyahu can destroy Hamas completely. But then he is also continuing for only reason because the day he stops, next day maybe that he may not be in chair. So there are political contents when it comes to war. And war is also an extension of politics, as it is said. It is politics by other means. So that is how it is going on. But I don't think any side has the appetite for a world war or escalation beyond a point and escalation to a full-scale nuclear war. And there are so many stakes now. There are weapons which can destroy your assets in space. Now, if assets in space are destroyed, there is a vulnerability both ways. The NATO is also worried. The Russians are also worried. The Chinese are also worried. Everybody is worried. So, who is going to challenge or push the other side to an extent that your own survival is threatened? I am 100% sure that Washington will not save Poland or Zelensky at the risk of destroying Washington or New York. That is a statement of fact. So therefore, Washington will have to find a ways and means somewhere in between. And that in between does not sound like a world war.
Very, very well put up. Actually, people know how to start a war, but they don't know how to exit a war. And it's so ironical that now everyone I see the American businesses now trying to capture Ukrainian grains so that they can recover the cost. That's what is happening. And majority of the aid which has went from the West to Ukraine has been in the form of military aid and in the form of their own contractors getting benefited. We have seen that in USA and we have seen that in Europe also. And they also sent not fully equipped tanks also. Like we have seen Leopard older versions. We have seen Abraham tanks older version, not the latest version 2A. And those have become the sitting ducks for the Russian forces. And they're showing it off also. Every time they hit something HIMARS, they show it off. Now coming back to the Indian context, because you are very well aware of the Indian context. How is the Indian forces prepared for tackling should some kind of these kind of things be imposed on India?
See, as far as Indian threat is concerned, let's put it this way, that Chinese have a strategy and we know what their strategy is. As I said, Chinese are adopting active defense strategy and are doing incremental warfare, incremental encroachment, which is also called, people also call it as salami slicing. So therefore, what they are looking at is they also do not want to fight India. And a war between India and China, I don't think anyone wants to fight it. So therefore, but anything short of war, China would like to pitch India to an extent that it remains pitched at number 2 in Asia. They don't want to concede a rising India, and they do feel that rising India is a competitor. So therefore, they would certainly like India to be put at place. Now, that's one part of it. But now let's look at the methodology what China is adopting. Basically, we had confidence building measures in Border Peace and Tranquility Agreement of 1993 and confidence building measures of 1996 and certain other agreements thereafter. So as per that, both sides were well behind the line of actual goal and were not supposed to be reaching there, not supposed to be deployed there. But then they thought of taking a first mover's advantage during COVID, and they moved ahead. And India also reciprocated in a manner that we could mobilize, despite although our infrastructure is not as good as on the Chinese side, but we did mobilize in real time and created a similar amount of force structure. And we also did a little quid pro quo action to give a message on Kailash range, and we occupied some heights which we were not occupying, which we never occupied earlier. So with the result, the message was very clear that if you encroach, then we also encroach. And thereafter, perhaps some kind of disengagement took place, except 2 points which are left, for which the talks are on. So that's one part of it. So what China is looking towards India is that if they can win India without fighting. Now, the methodologies adopted are border encroachment is something which everybody sees. But there is another side of the story, and that is the economic war. Their incremental encroachment in economy is hell of a lot. They did fair amount of digital encroachment in terms of mobile companies. At a point, we had bulk of the mobiles, almost about 70% of the mobiles in India, which were Chinese made. The product of are Chinese made. So our consumer dependency on China was tremendous. Even now, it is hell of a lot. So with the result, with that kind of interdependency, there is no way that we should that we can totally ignore the economic angle. Converse is also true. Now, everybody says that China has invested the biggest investment in Pakistan, that is in terms of China-Pakistan economic corridor. The whole world must know that the kind of trade balance which we have, imbalance which we have with China, we give more than one CPEC worth of amount in balance of in BOP terms to China every year. What to talk of the entire investment? So if our trade is about $120 billion or something like that, bulk of it is Chinese trade, Chinese imports to India. So China is making almost about $80 billion every year from India. So why will they leave that market? So therefore, no side, and of course Chinese economy is also not doing so well now, with the fair amount of things, BRI not working. Similarly, there are some of the real estate companies not doing too well, and a whole lot of other, and the kind of Chinese aggression which has been shown, and the kind of competition which they have gone into with Americans, they have also bought fair amount of, shall I say, isolation in some manner. That the world is looking at decoupling, and now everybody knows, because China was made a world factory, so decoupling is difficult because it will take at least 10-15 years. So de-risking is the new buzzword going around. And similarly, you will find that the stock exchanges, Hong Kong has has come down from third spot to fourth spot, and India has occupied, has gone up by one spot above Hong Kong in terms of the investments. So we find that for China also there is a problem. Now, if you see the muted response to Russia-Ukraine war of China, one of the major factor is that China sees that they have a market in Europe, they have a market in America. Minus these two markets, Chinese economy is worth nothing. So they cannot afford to lose that market. So that is why you would have seen that the response has been reasonably limited, in a manner that they only helped China where they were also getting help in economic terms. And they did not help Russians. Chinese did not help Russians in terms of military hardware directly, or in terms of standing with them in the war together. So therefore, there is no limit partnership of both these countries. Also has got limits, which we have seen during the Russia-Ukraine war. So apparently, if you see from this point of view, then we look at the relative strengths. Although in terms of the military assets, the number of military assets, China has much more than India. But then the fact is, China has borders with many more countries than India. China also has many more engagements other than India, and China's main battleground happens to be the eastern seaboard, that is next to South China Sea and Taiwan. So therefore, their bulk of the major assets are committed there. So the amount of assets which it can bring against us, and given the terrain friction of Himalayas, these two factors play a major role. And with that, I think India is reasonably confident that they can handle China. And we are doing appropriate capacity building accordingly. Now, these two factors which I just mentioned at the end, the terrain friction, shall I say, the kind of soldiers which we have, because we are a permanent army, whereas others are conscripted armies. Now, conscripted armies cannot be that well trained as the permanent army. And similarly, when there is a national cause on your side, then it again becomes difficult to perhaps dominate somebody. So the same thing happened in Vietnam. Now, in Vietnam, France lost because, again, terrain friction of Vietnam, the cause in favor of Vietnam, the fighters in favor of Vietnam, and they were defending their country. Same happened when USA was there. Same happened when Chinese attacked Vietnam. So this is a major factor. Otherwise, there is no reason that the world's strongest power could not win that particular war. Now, today you apply the same yardstick in Red Sea. There is no, there is no comparison of asymmetry between the American power and Houthis. But then the fact is, Americans did launch strike. They launched a whole lot of strikes, and thereafter they realized that the strikes, Houthis are not stopping again. Now, what is the next option? One option is that you just finished from Afghanistan. Either you physically land your troops there to stop Houthis, and if you don't do that, Houthis will continue. So if that is the case, then finally what I am given to understand is that back channel talks are on with Iran to say that, okay, the Iran should put some brakes on Houthis, and Iran is also saying that if you can't put brakes on Israel, how can we put brakes on Houthis? Because they are working independently, and if Netanyahu is also deciding to work independently, whether he is winning or losing, that's a separate discussion which I will. But the fact is that this guy is continuing, and he's saying, no, I will continue in Rafah also, without having a well thought plan as to what he's going to do with 1.5 million Palestinians who are there, and the massacre of them, which I don't think anybody in the world is going to accept. Because there is a limit up to which USA can defend Israel, not beyond a point globally. So that's one part of it. Similarly, again, when I talk of asymmetry, you just see the amount of military arsenal, intelligence, technology, everything of Israel. Hamas is no match to that. But then the fact is that Netanyahu's war aims the first aim was that, okay, I should be able to release my hostages. I don't think more than 2 to 3 guys have been released because of military pressure. All have been released because of negotiations. Now, if that be the case, then the negotiation should be the end state and not building military pressure. So the fact is, all hostages which you got back are purely out of negotiations and nothing else. So your military campaign has not worked at all. Second is, has Hamas finished? The answer is no. Because firstly, it's an ideology. Secondly, all Hamas are not in Gaza. They may be elsewhere also. Thirdly, you declared that, okay, northern Gaza I have cleared. And all of a sudden, the day you declare that, next day, Hamas launches few rockets from northern Gaza again. And now are you going to go back and start bombing again from the north? The fact is, the terrorist group, we have been fighting terrorists. A terrorist has to be lucky only once. Whereas the security forces have to be lucky every time, and you can't be lucky every time. So therefore, there are certain limitations. So all this theory of deterrence, the theory of it works against the regular troops, against a regular enemy. it need not work against non-state actors and terrorists especially, and silent workers like ISIS and things like that. So some elements will remain. You will not be able to finish off. But if you lose population, if you lose the goodwill of population, which is the most important thing, because population is the center of gravity in Gaza. And if even if you, let's say hypothetically, destroy the present generation of Hamas, there is a new generation already in making because of the kind of atrocities which have been caused, and they are not going to let Israel live peacefully at all. So in the long run, you are losing that war, and Netanyahu is losing that war. So therefore, what consists of victory, at the definition of victory, is one part of it. And secondly, making a strategy and making a war aim without thinking through the conflict termination and an exit strategy is the biggest mistake which has been done by Israel. And same is the case with the Western provocation in Ukraine. Whatever Zelensky may have thought when he said that, oh, I want to join NATO at any cost, the question is, he did not think it through as to what could be the implications and what is going to be the end state. And it may still happen that getting into NATO may still remain a distant dream, and he may destroy the entire Ukraine in the bargain. So this is how perhaps the wars are playing out. But I don't see that there is anybody who has the appetite or the resilience or the economic muscles to go in for a world war.
Great point, and I really marvel at your depth of thinking in these areas, because people don't realize that how a Indian military mind functions, which is totally different. And like a Indian military general will think about all aspects before they decide on a war. But I see one problem in the West is the the what do you call it, the cowboy culture, going and shooting and putting some horse strands, and they think that war is like that. War is completely different. What you show as a hero in a movie is not really in the war. And one more thing I've noticed also is that most of the Hollywood movies, whatever they show on the screen, the actual performance of the Western forces on the ground is exactly opposite of that. So if they show that they go and went and conquer somebody, but on the ground they ran away from Vietnam, they ran away from many other places, including Afghanistan. So, so with this historical aspect being there, how do you see, like, the most of the Western analysts, they skip the point that the what they show on Hollywood movies is what their forces are not. Case in point is the British forces. It's a very small force, British now, 300 tanks, 60,000 actually fighting force, which is very small, and their warships are not even functional. Many of them. We had a recent case where the aircraft carrier had to withdraw from the from being deployed in a war game. And there was another report where the British ship reached without weapons. They did not have missiles because they were depending on US to supply missiles, and the US missiles have gone to Ukraine. So how do you see the Indian military production? Because in any war like this, and now that concept has also broken, the small armies and more technology that is gone now. We need to have manpower. So that how does the Indian perspective change with all these wars, which is traditionally being the permanent army, like that you mentioned correctly?
See, we learned our lessons, and we also studied the wars of the West. Now, as I see today, firstly, let me take two examples, and then I'll be able to derive the difference and the lessons. The first example is 1971 war. Here was a case that in 16 days war, we won, we created a new country, and we beated a professional army with 93,000 prisoners of war. Why it happened? For the simple reason, because the aim was very clear. The center of gravity was Dhaka. Everybody was to move to Dhaka, just secure the supply lines and leave everything behind. But it was physical troops who have to physically go there and make sure that they are there in Dhaka and they surround Dhaka and create a situation where the enemy knows that he is totally dislocated, disoriented, and has no choice but to surrender. So, therefore, the military campaign was predominantly a campaign which was, in addition to the arsenal, it was backed by the physical ground action too. Now, they take the case of Afghanistan and the Western armies, including Israeli army. We had very good, shall I say, we had a very respectable respect for Israeli army, the way they launched the NTB raids. It was very well planned. It was a marvelous operation. But today, when they launched operations in Gaza, their intention was that launch standoff attacks. And in that standoff attack, make sure that your people don't fire, or your people don't get into contact with the Hamas fighters till the time you destroy everything there, even if it amounts to destroying and killing all civilians there. So basically, what they were doing was standoff attack, pulverize and destroy everything where you feel that there can be somebody who can kill you, and then you just go and mop up so that you don't die casualties. Same thing was happening in Afghanistan. They were destroying, they captured the, shall I say, the important centers of power, and they were launching standoff attacks, and they were not there in hinterland. So Taliban was very well furnishing in hinterland. In hinterland, the terrain friction is bad. It's a bad terrain there, and there the tough soldiers will survive. So that is why Taliban survived, and bulk of the American forces, or shall I say Western forces, they were more located towards convenient places with reasonable protection, and all operations which were being launched were machine launched, or shall I say launched by technology. So when you go in for technology based operations, you cannot claim the victory on ground. So victory on ground is slightly different than standoff attacks, and that is why today what you find is that all of a sudden, whatever happens, we say, okay, the response is firstly sanctions, and secondly airstrikes, and then you say that, okay, we are the biggest power on the world. Now, with sanctions and airstrikes, you couldn't discipline Iran in the manner in which you wanted them to discipline. And same is the case with with Vietnam. That Vietnamese survived. They survived all kinds of bombardment which was made on them. Secondly, when it comes to winning the hearts and minds, I recently visited Vietnam, and I found that in all their museums, they were mocking Western forces, and they were not mocking Chinese. So I asked them, why is it so? You fought war with France. You are showing them in a very poor light. You fought war with US. You are also showing them in a very poor light. And you fought with Chinese, and you sustained them as well. In fact, they beaten them in a manner because Chinese wanted them to get out of Cambodia, which they couldn't achieve. And the center of gravity was Hanoi, which Chinese couldn't achieve. And Vietnamese ensured that Chinese reached their culmination point before getting the center of gravity, and therefore Chinese, in my opinion, lost. But there is nothing against China in any museum of Vietnam. So they said, sir, there are two reasons. Reason number one is that China helped us in gaining independence. We can't forget that. Number one. Number two was they never caused atrocities on us. Whereas Americans, they used Agent Orange on us. With the result, 3 of our generations were spoiled. And therefore, the hatred towards Americans is not going to go away. Today, it is exactly, Netanyahu is doing exactly the same mistake. So, this is the way, perhaps this must change, should change, and has been identified so. And that is why I am repeatedly reminded of this author, Sean McFate, where he has said as to why, despite everything, you are losing all wars. And he has also said, the best weapons don't fire. That means your technology will not let you win war. So therefore, you need to have your strategic forces, your special forces. You need to invest on certain other things other kind of warfare, which perhaps the others are perhaps making the better of it. Like China has adopted to three warfare strategy: psychological war, media war, and legal war. So when you find that there are a whole lot of police stations in America of Chinese, that one fine day you wake up to say, they've done a hell of a lot of job. Same is the case with you find there is a Chinatown everywhere in the world. Similarly, through Belt and Road Initiative, they have put half the world into debt trap, all smaller countries, and subsequently, obviously, they will not pay, so they will grab something, and that something is their resources, basically. Now, I think it's very late when Americans realize. They are thinking that, okay, let's give a tremendous amount of loan to Ukraine, and then we will have their grain fields with us very soon. Late reaction, but perhaps maybe that they've learned some debt trap lessons from China as well. Who knows? I mean, these are speculations, but then the fact is that this is the trend. This is the kind of trend which is happening. So there is no doubt that standoff attacks purely by technology, purely by artificial intelligence, nobody is going to win the war. Although all these are force multipliers, they are. It's not that India is not doing it. We are also trying to develop our capacities and capabilities in all these new technologies and new dimensions of warfare. But all these, but our lessons are quite clear. We have learned our lessons that at the end of the day, it is the man behind the gun who wins you the war, and not the force multipliers. Force multipliers can only enhance your capacities, but they cannot, by itself, they cannot win you a war.
Amazing and very clear. And those of you who are watching this video, watches again and again, because Major General S.B. Asthana has completely debunked the Western analysts and Western reporters who are always claiming that the World War III is going to happen, and they lack the wherewithal and the mindset to fight on the ground. So Hollywood movies are different. You can make Hollywood movie for anything, but on the ground is completely different. Those are studios, and the reality is different. One last question I have is the Western think tanks, because मैं हिंदी में उनको बोलता हूँ सोच का कुआं. It's like it's a black box. You put into it, it disappears towards the end. So how relevant are these Western think tanks today? Because I find them very funny, and despite of all their degrees like PhDs and all those things, I don't think so they produce any output which can be tangible for the West. And sometimes it feels that they are responsible for the decline of the West also.
See, there are two things. It's not that they can, certainly Western think tanks can think. They have a lot of information. They have a lot of technology to gain information and analyze information. And they have a lot of tools to work out that information.
I would like to correct myself here.
Yeah.
You can have a lot of information, but analysis is a different ballgame altogether.
Yeah, I'm coming to that.
Yes.
What has happened is, in case of the Western countries, especially I would say US-led NATO once again, I keep talking that because the remaining NATO is basically following US line, as we see in Russia-Ukraine war, and there is no independent thinking going on as far as Europe is concerned. So that's one part of it. Secondly, as far as the think tanks are concerned, the Western world, they want to use the information tool quite a bit. So information warfare is superseding almost everything. And in information warfare, they make a narrative and then they expect all the think tanks to follow that narrative. So what is happening is, in India, and in military terms, we call it as they are all situating the appreciation. That means they want a particular outcome, and all the analysis thereafter starts, shall I say, gravitating in a manner that the outcome given by the political hierarchy, that is supported. So if everybody says that, let's say hypothetically, Putin must lose, Russia is bad, Russia is this, Russia is that, is fine. And Russia is the competitor. That's one part of it. But the question is, the think tanks otherwise know that what is truth. So sometimes when you have discussions, because I had a lot of discussions with the Western think tanks, and when in the discussion stage, I find that all of them talk sense, but when it comes to their papers, they all follow a particular narrative which the country is taking. So basically, their independent thought process gets hijacked, as I see, or gets colored by the narrative which they feel that it is their duty or it is in their national interest to support. So that is where perhaps we find that a colored view is coming up. Otherwise, I don't think there is any reason for anybody, even certain professionals like the defense minister or secretary of defense. He said very clearly, I remember in Russia-Ukraine war, he said there is no way that Ukraine can get back all the territory. It will be very difficult. I think a word coming very difficult from his should have adequate has got adequate depth, and what he's saying is absolutely right. Same is the case the other side. As far as Israel-Hamas war is concerned, I think his wordings was that even if Israel wins tactically, they will lose strategically. So Israel is losing strategically, and that is exactly what I analyzed and said. So therefore, this is so it's not that there is no logical thinking. Logical thinking is there, but then the clamor to follow a particular narrative and churn out papers and research papers to suit that particular narrative, so that that narrative plays up and you put the adversary down on the information warfare domain. That I think is the reason as to why the truth is not coming out exactly in the manner in which it should come out. So apparently, there is. I see the problem in shaping the narrative is concerned. But otherwise, from the capability of analysis, I think I have very healthy respect for a large number of analysts in the West, like the one which I mentioned about Sean McFadden and many others. There are a whole lot of others. Mercimer is another one who has been saying almost the same thing, which we all have been saying. And then there are others as well who have been saying so.
So now I'll take audience questions also. It was a
Yeah.
live show, and those of you would like to ask, we did not do in Hindi because we also wanted Americans to also learn. So, what is the Indian perspective from a military point of view? And that's why we did not do in Hindi. For people who can be asking questions, there's one question which has come, and people have loved your talk this time. Very clear, very concise, and people have loved it. So, Raghunandan ji's question is there.
Mhm.
Is already World War III is already happening from 1945 till now. West says it's Cold War. Sir, view on it.
Yes, it is a Cold War, and Cold War is continuing. And the Cold War, the dimensions of this Cold War have now changed. As I said, we are not going to see the blitzkrieg and the so-called air-land battles and operational maneuver groups of Russians and things like that. I don't think that era is there because of the battlefield transparency level is so much that everybody who is on the offensive side is going to buy casualties. Like in Russia-Ukraine war, when they were on the offensive, they bought hell of a lot of casualties. When Ukraine was on the offensive or on the counter-offensive, they bought hell of a lot of casualties. So apparently that is not going to happen. But the new dimensions in terms of the political war, the diplomatic war, the technological war, the cyber war, the information war, and there is a new instrument which has come up, perception war, and there is a new instrument which has come up, which is very interesting. And this instrument which we are also facing, it's a tough challenge for us. And that is called as creating social unrest in the target country. This is a new paradigm in warfare. Like earlier, what you used to think is like we are the victims of proxy war by Pakistan. And they used to send terrorists, kill a couple of guys, and few guys killed. The fact was that yes, we all used to feel bad and then take the retaliatory actions, but then it was not shaking up the central, shall I say, central government. Now what has happened is, all of a sudden they realized that if you create social unrest in a country, it can shake up the central government in a manner that you find that all of a sudden when President Trump lands up in India, a protest starts in Delhi. The day he leaves, the protest ends. So obviously it is for a purpose, and after that purpose there is no protest because there is no disgruntlement. Similarly, all of a sudden you will find that you find a Kisan Andolan for no rhyme or reason, and then the Kisan Andolan vanishes after some time. Similarly, you also find this. There is not a single guy, I think, in Punjab who has got any idea or any clamor for Khalistan. But guys in Canada, and there are a whole lot of guys in America, they keep raising all these. My answer to all these so-called Khalistanis is that if Canada is shielding them on the name of free speech, and if they want to make a Khalistan in Canada, we have no problems. Let you please handle your Khalistan in Canada, but in India it will not be done, and they all will be hammered well and proper where in case they land up in India. So that's absolutely clear. So the point I'm trying to make is that this is a new dimension of warfare. So new dimensions have overtaken, and we don't visualize that because of maybe you can also say that a fair amount of you can give a credibility or to nuclear arsenal as well, that the two sides are so overly loaded, and the dangerousness of space warfare, hypersonic warfare, nuclear warfare is so much that going back as to what happened in 1945, that may be difficult now because of the obvious the dangerous potential of the arsenal which both sides have, which can spoil the entire world, destroy the world many times over. So the other side, the Cold War, will continue, and therefore this is the way perhaps we will have to get used to this kind of warfare. But in the bargain, what happens is there will be smaller contact wars, and these smaller contact wars are the proxy wars, as we have seen. Then there is a era of intra wars, like in Africa. Most of the wars are intra conflicts. Instead of interstate conflict, they are intrastate conflicts. And there are proxy elements, there are outside elements, there are P5 members also who are supporting one side or the other within those domains. So this is going to continue. Regime change efforts is another area. We find very recently we found things happening in a slightly different manner in our neighborhood in Maldives. That all of a sudden you find knowing fully well that if there is a problem of if there is a disaster, the only guy who can save Maldives is India. Despite that, you had an India out campaign, and along with the India out campaign, you find a defense deal with China. So obviously there was somebody's election. Maybe he had some help from somewhere, and then a campaign was made out of it. And then after that campaign, perhaps there is a different side. But then the fact is that it's 50-50. And then because there is population, there is pro-India population as well. And then you find that smaller countries are more vulnerable to this kind of influence operations, because you find that smaller countries, especially poorer countries, they are short of resources, and anybody who can give them resources and influence them in the bargain, he can change opinions and at times make a difference in the outcome or change in leadership or regime as well. So the regime change is another era, is another instrument of warfare now. Efforts for regime change or meddling into internal affairs of others. So perhaps these are some of the additional elements of warfare which have entered. But certainly all is adding on to Cold War, in my opinion, and not nothing can be categorized as a move towards World War.
No, very well put. And also the one really question comes in, like the, like you said, the perception changes and the regime changing operations, intra warfare, like what their social media is doing. Most of the social media is American controlled social media, Western controlled social media, and what they're doing is creating an opinion, and also creating a narrative which hurts the local populations in a big way. In a way, colonization is still continuing in many ways, and we are still using Western machines and Western ideas most of the times. One question comes in here. I will ask only specific questions if I feel it relevant to the
Yeah,
discussion.
yeah, yeah.
DK1, I think this answer has been already given by General Saab before. So you can check the old previous part of the video. Uh, and the nuclear war, he categorically denied it's going to not going to happen. Uh, she wants Taiwan plus TSMC. If TSMC and PSMC will move out, will she be interested in unification? I mean, it is a Western created war, Taiwan against mainland China. Taiwan has, if USA is not there, Taiwan won't exist also, pretty much. So what is your view, sir?
See, Taiwan, I have been to Taiwan and I have, in fact, done a long course in Taiwan. So I must tell you that as far as Taiwan is concerned, uh, Taiwan is democratic. I don't think, uh, and it is the largest trading partner is China. Bulk of their investment of Taiwan are in China. Bulk of the money in Taiwan is in China, although they are trying to diversify now. They didn't do so earlier because they thought that the work culture of the two sides is almost the same. Uh, Taiwan is 96% Hans as mainland China. So the demography is exactly the same. There are more than I don't know how many thousands of marriages either side. So there are both sides are relatives. So it is not all that easy to use force on Taiwan. But what was being tried so far, in my opinion, was that China was doing fair amount of firepower demonstration and trying to make sure that DPP doesn't come to power, because what they are thinking is that DPP has an orientation towards being more independent, and being more independent is not exactly the same as declaring independence. There are two things when between USA and China. Three things were settled. China's red line is that Taiwan should not become nuclear, and Taiwan should not declare independence, and USA should not recognize it as an independent country. None of these red line has been crossed. The USA's red line to China was, please don't do it by force, because and that red line has also not been crossed. Now, short of that, China has done everything in a manner of firepower demonstration and trying to convince. So they were hoping that with the firepower demonstration, they may be able to perhaps convince the people of Taiwan that if DPP comes into power, your existence is at risk, and therefore don't bring them into power, and therefore vote for the other side, that is KMT. But then the fact was that Taiwanese feel that they are Taiwanese more and China and not Chinese, bulk of them. And secondly, they like their democracy very much. So therefore, they have not bought that bait. China was trying that for a peaceful, so-called peaceful negotiation, but there is nothing like peaceful negotiation because the ideas are wide apart. Secondly, if the democratic, if let's say hypothetically, even if Taiwan becomes part of China, the kind of democratic wind which will flow in mainland China, the CCP will have a problem at hand. Secondly, a destroyed TSMC is of no use to China. But then the fact is that TSMC is certainly 60% of the chips being made in TSMC of the world is important. So chips are important. There is no doubt about it. But then the fact is that if you use force, will you get TSMC in one piece? I have my doubts because the Taiwanese do have modern aircrafts, they have modern weapons, and they have Army, Navy, Air Force, all the three. And if they fight, at least they can give 2-3 months of fight which is good enough to destroy TSMC, because China will have to perhaps the kind of warfare which will going on, which will have to be undertaken. Taiwan is not going to give a walkover. Number one, nor will, in my opinion, USA and Japan will let them give one walkover because of two reasons. One is, if you see we have war gamed this scenario. When you look at the war game, there is no way that you can capture Taiwan without using the maritime space of Japan, and so therefore Japan gets involved. And if Japan gets involved, you have a treaty certainly with Japan. Even if you say that, okay, my Relation Act is not good enough, Taiwan Relation Act is not good enough, and NDA is not good enough, and I can maintain, America can maintain strategic ambiguity. But and let's say hypothetically, if China succeeds there, then subsequently, United Nations is certainly not the only superpower. Then China would have perhaps unseated United States as the superpower. So USA will have to protect that, and they will have to perhaps intervene, and therefore a fair amount of moves, which are logical moves, which have taken place by USA, like making additional bases in Philippines, and some of these bases are very close to Taiwan. So if a blockade of Taiwan has to be done, and if operations have to be launched, they will have to be launched right under the nose of United States bases. So therefore, there is a risk involved. Secondly, let's say, let's take Xi Jinping. A defeat in a war to reunify Taiwan is, I think, is going to be the end of his regime, because he can't afford that, and there are a fair chances that it may happen. Secondly, after Russia-Ukraine war, we all have seen that you can start a war. This is a new trend today. You can start a war. When it will end, you don't know. The same thing happened. We went after Taliban. USA went after Taliban, and it carried on for 20 years. Now, how does China know that it will not continue for so long? After all, Vietnam was also not very long. Was also not a very large territory, and if USA had to continue there for 8-10 years, then how is it that PRC can assume that I will not have to continue there for that long? So therefore, the stakes are so much. There is an article written by a Chinese journal in South China Morning Post, which says that in cost-benefit analysis, it doesn't suit China to overtake Taiwan by force. So apparently, in my opinion, this rhetoric will continue, and the firepower demonstrations are also going to continue to make sure that DPP does not declare independence. So long the status quo continues, I think it will remain like that. Nobody will give up his claim. China will not give up his claim, but it will continue like that. That is what I think so.
Great point, Major General Asana. And also, thank you all the viewers for joining today. It was a long show, but very clear. So I'll just summarize. There is no World War III happening, and don't rely on any media reports coming from the West on the World War III. And World War III is just a many YouTube channels are saying it, and mainstream media is saying it, especially in the West. It's not going to happen, and I think there are many more sensible minds who want to prevent a nuclear war between any side. It's going to be a collective disaster. So thank you so much for coming on the show and clarifying this point, which I asked you for a short notice, but you came, and thank you very much for that, General Asthana. And for all the viewers who joined, I would have hoped that you would come in big numbers. But next time when he comes, please come, because he's a published author and he does speak on many international forum. And I think right now after this show, he's going to speak to Polish TV directly. So he's a well sought after general, and please do come next time when he comes here, and we will also bring such important questions which debunks mythology created by the West on every single front. Mythology works in every single way, and mythology doesn't mean Puranic, by the way, and which usually shows up in the chat GPT and other places. So thank you very much for coming, and thank you for all the viewers for joining. I'm very grateful to all of you who joined, and we'll see you in the next show. Namaste.
Thank you so much, and thank you for all the viewers. Uh, and I really enjoyed the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you.